All right, here we go with a Week 10 primetime edition of Between the Horns, presented by your Southern California Toyota dealers. I'm JB Long, joined by a couple of Instagram fitness influencers, Stu Jackson and Maurice Jones-Drew, both throwing it around.
I just got to 50K this week.
What, your followers?
Yeah, blowing up.
It's because of that incline bench. Flex on them. Did you see Stu's post this morning?
No.
What time, Stu?
6:06.
Gotcha.
6:06?
Yeah.
Deadlifts.
What? All right, I gotta go.
Surprise.
Let me go get in the gym. I'm tripping. Fresh off a flight right now.
We began this episode by saying happy birthday to Marissa Daly, the VP and GM of Ram Studios. All she asked for was a 3-game winning streak to get back to 500. So happy birthday, Marissa. There it is. We'll see what the Rams can do to build from here.
I love that. Happy birthday. And that might be the best gift that you probably gotten all year.
Well, now I think she wants a Monday Night Football victory, so let's see what the Rams can do to deliver in prime time against the Miami Dolphins. But first, your reflections on the win that was a defensive-driven performance and overtime walk-off thriller in Seattle.
I think for me, it was just like you mentioned, defense-driven, fourth straight game that the defense scores a touchdown, and really just all the clutch plays that they were able to make. Really the plays that were made by the pressure that was brought and created. That's something that's been consistently showing up really over the last 3 weeks. But now you're starting to see it translate not only into scoring opportunities for the defense, but even from a complementary standpoint, the offense is starting to take advantage. Obviously, we saw that even just with the fourth down stop that set up and ultimately led to that walk-off touchdown in overtime in that drive. But that was what stood out the most to me.
Well, what I thought was the improvement that you saw from week 1 till last week, right, to week 9, being overtime in week 1, Lions run right down your throat, score. Seattle starts going down the field, making chunks. You get them to 4th and 1, and then they test your run defense. And you go out and you stop one of the top backs in the NFL and Kenneth Walker on 4th and 1, you probably knock them back a couple yards and you give your offense a chance. And I all the pressures, and that was awesome. But to see the way they stood up in that 4th and 1, that have to have it situation, and how everyone bowed up and made a play, that was awesome to see. And then on the other side, to see the offense kind of mature throughout the course of the game, right? It was the defensive battle early on, and I think it was less of a defensive battle, more of an offense just wasn't clicking. That it reminded me of that first play, that first third down or second down to Cooper Kupp where he's wide open and you just miss him. Right. But to keep working through those things and then figuring out a way to get points at the end and then to kind of light it up a little bit, then have the walk-off was just like a whole progression of not starting well, not starting fast, but then moving on and then continuing to the end of the game and just keep chopping away.
I got some screws loose. You guys got to help me. What's wrong with me? I come away each day less encouraged by that win.
Really?
Than when we left Seattle. Yeah, it's like the opposite of the victory over the Vikings, where I felt like it got better. It aged and was more encouraging. I don't know. I don't like the Orlovskis and the Cowherds of the world buying all the way back in on the 4-4 Rams, because I don't know. I just don't think the Rams' performance in totality is deserving of that yet. I'm not saying they can't get there, but I don't think it's deserving yet.
I would say you got to think Seattle had lost, 2 or 3 straight at that point?
3 in a row at home, now 4 in a row at home.
So you lost 3 in a row at home, and this was like gotta have it for them. Right, they were out there selling out. Dudes were doing everything, flying around, like making plays and all these different things, and you're able to withstand that kind of that onslaught early on, very defensively, and then you're able to bounce back. To me, that's what I saw offensively. Now, on the other side, the defense just dominated that game for the most part. Obviously, JSN had a huge day, which hurt.
That's one of the things for me. I mean, you give up 180 and 2 touchdowns and a whole bunch more that were negated by penalty.
Right.
That doesn't feel great.
No, that wasn't the best. But I think offensively for me, it was that defense tried to stand up and protect their head coach, right? Because he's under a lot of pressure right now. And you were able to kind of work through some of those issues you had offensively.
I don't know, the Seahawks self-inflicted mistakes, though, and the fact that you were right there with them all the way into overtime when they had like 2nd and 31, a couple of 1st and 20s, a 3rd and 33. Like just the shotgun snap was an issue for them.
Yeah.
Look, I give them full credit for finding a way, and that's all that matters. It's all that matters.
I felt like this game should have been over in the third quarter. If we're gonna talk like that, the game should have been over in the third quarter.
But I think the Seahawks feel that way too. I feel like both teams walked away feeling like we should have blown them out.
No question. I agree.
And the Seahawks, if they make a different fourth down decision or a better execution, or they pick that first throw to Tyler Johnson that he saves, like, we're singing a completely different tune now is all I feel like.
I think sometimes you'd rather be lucky than good, right? If that makes sense. Like that throw that we've seen Stafford make that throw before, and sometimes it goes in the other guy's hands. Just so happened that Tyler Johnson was streaking across the field that at that time and made a play on it.
Yeah. This is why I need this show, for you guys to get me right before Monday Night Football. And don't get me wrong, like, I love this team. I'm starting to feel about this 24 team the way that I think we all felt about the 23 team. I guess my point is you just cannot continue to expect to get like 5.5 points per game scored by your defense. Like 7 sacks, 3 turnovers has been a great way to live, but there's a pretty good chance that we just saw the best defensive month of the season from the Rams defense. And now it's time, Stu, for this offense to get on a heater and be who we thought they could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can have the sloppiness that you had in the first half of the Seattle game. In that game, any game really at any point the rest of the season. It's encouraging that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are both back. Obviously, you would prefer that Puka keep his emotions in check in a situation like that, which again, he and McVay both addressed that already. But they're starting to click. They're starting to get a little bit healthier now too. Potentially getting some offensive line reinforcements here this week, and we'll see how that looks.
I thought Sean said it best at the end of the game. Like this game was crazy. Right, and it was. It just the ball was bouncing every which way, right? And you just got on the lucky end, which you never apologize for being lucky, right? Because guys are in position to make plays. But I do think as they get healthier, and I think we've said this when I was saying it earlier, the blessing in disguise starts to become the blessing now, right? Because you're getting healthier. The team that we expected offensively to be there with the offensive linemen, the receivers, the running backs, they're all starting to come back. And so if you can scratch and claw and find a way to sneak out victories here or there, you start to gain confidence. And then as your confidence grows, your guys are getting healthier and they're starting to come back. Now you should be able to do everything you want to do. And then we should be able to see this offense in totality, right? Right now, I still think we're seeing glimpses of what it could be or what is that. You're starting an undrafted rookie. You're starting a rookie at center. And even though they're both playing well, they're not the two guys that you were prepared to play with, right? So the running game may be a little bit different because they're not the same size as the other guys that you had starting. So there's just a lot of little things that are going on. I think Demarcus Robinson has really grown from that role of being the guy, right, to now being number 3 and then really exploding as that third guy to beat Tariq Woolen on those 2 touchdowns. I mean, the first one where he just runs like a one-step slant and whips back out, like I don't think anybody can cover that.
You almost put him on the ground.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And then to walk off, do a one-handed on him, right? Like that's again, like, and we don't give Seattle enough credit for what they've done up there. Tariq Woolen's one of the best cover guys in the game. You're talking about a 6'4" guy that can run like the wind, and you're able to get behind him and make plays. So guys are showing up, which is what you want, and they're showing up at the right time.
It just feels like now's the time. This is the point in the season where some really key supporting cast members have done everything in their power to keep you afloat, and now you're 4-4. You're back in the fight. The front line guys, especially the offensive guys, got to take that baton and run with it. So we're essentially at the midway point of the season. What do you think the Rams need to do to improve? What areas can they use to go from good in contention to great NFC West champions?
Well, we were talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba earlier and the performance he had. To me, it's capping those explosive plays in the pass game. The return of Darius Williams has helped quite a bit with that. But, you look at the game earlier this season that Marvin Harrison Jr. had when the Rams took on the Cardinals. And there are other examples, that you could point to as well. That's really the only thing that's, I would say that's the knock against this defense right now, at least that I can see. And that's really getting in the way of this team reaching its ceiling. If you can mitigate those and limit their impact, things will turn a corner for the positive.
Yeah, to me, I think it's the tight end position. We need more out of that.
Dude, you reading my notes?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry, I didn't. Is that what you were going to say? I'm sorry. I'll go somewhere else.
No, it's amazing.
I just think that you need more out of the tight end position. Too many times you're seeing holding penalties, right? They're negating big plays. And then the passing game, where's been Kobe Parkinson, we brought him in to be that kind of red zone guy. I don't know if he's banged up or not. I mean, he's playing, but it's just we're not getting what we thought we should be getting out of those guys offensively. Especially over last year when we became a 12 personnel team late in the year to start running the football.
First on my list was tamping down explosives, clean up the screen game on defense in particular. Like, as you get this reputation for being a ferocious pass rushing team, what are opposing offenses going to do to cool you off? And especially when you get into some of those long down and distances, like Seattle bailed out of some just ferocious
Second and 31.
Yeah, and then the tight end room is it for me too. Like, you rewind time to the summer, we were talking about, okay, this has a chance to be the most impactful tight end room of the Sean McVay era. It hasn't been. I know Pro Football Focus has its limitations, but they rank the individuals on the Rams 36th, 37th, and 67th among tight ends. I don't necessarily need to see them go for big passing games, but the other things you mentioned and just the mistake minimization, I think that's a big area for growth.
To me, your tight end is supposed to be the biggest mismatch on the field, right? And I thought Kobe Parkinson's had those opportunities being that guy. I thought Hunter Long has come in as a blocker and Davis Allen. They've done a great job of going in and accepting their role, but you know, it's hard. You just have to move your feet, right? I think Kyron has made some cuts that you're like, wow, but then that puts them in a little bit of a bind. And instead of moving your feet, they're kind of like trying to position block a little bit, if I'm going to critique that position. But I think when you get to third down, you have three viable weapons at wide receiver. You need that fourth one, that one that's a mismatch on their fourth guy, right? And I think that's where Kobe Parkinson in the tight end position, they have to come up and be that outlet, that ability to be able to run what we saw against, was it the Niners, where he ran that quick like curl, caught it and he dropped it, but he was wide open, right? He was open for like 2 yards separation. So that's where that needs to come in, because third down is going to start being, teams are going to start trying to figure out how to double and confuse guys. They need to be the next guy to catch the ball.
The Rams were 3 of 13 on third down last week. That's one of the areas where it just didn't feel great. And we'll get some more of this in the matchup with the Dolphins, but I do think this is a big tight end week for two reasons. One, because the strength of the Miami defense is taking away your receivers. And then also in the running game. And I think that's probably, given what you two have just said, we're all default to, and to where can the Rams get better and become the team that they aspire to be. They've generated less rushing yards than expected on almost 75% of their handoffs. Like 3 out of every 4 handoffs are getting less yards than next gen expects them to get. They're not the running team that we thought they could be yet. Now, maybe getting these offensive linemen back, getting Puka and Kupp fully integrated again is the key to unlocking it. I believe that to be the case. But I think more than anything, Monday Night Football against the Dolphins is about having your best rushing night of the season. So far, that season high rushing total, 134 yards.
You got to be a little bit higher than that.
Not good enough, right? All right. Want to talk some youth on defense?
Yes, please.
Let's get positive. And I know this is something that you've studied, Stu, a lot in terms of the Rams approaching 2,000 total defensive snaps by first or second year players this season, and in particular on their defense.
Yeah, when you look at just what they were able to produce in the last game against the Seahawks, in particular, the 7 sacks, the 3 interceptions, 5 with the 9 players essentially who contributed to that, at least that I tallied. 5 of them are rookies. 7 of those 9 are first or second year players. So you're getting a lot of production out of young players right now. In particular, those momentum changing plays, and so it's something that's a really encouraging sign, and to me shows a lot of growth, especially with where guys like, I would say, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk especially were with converting some of those opportunities into sacks and tackles for loss, but also guys like Cam Kinchen stepping up and unexpectedly. And even after essentially a demotion, and making some really timely plays too.
It's funny. I was talking to my agent this morning, and we were talking about the Rams, and he was like, "Man, so tell me about them." I'm like, "Oh, well, they've scored 4 touchdowns in 4 games, or scored on defense, in 4 games. Safety, went through." And he was like, "Oh, they just don't know what they don't know." I was like, "No, that's not it. It's called coaching, right? You look at how they've schemed this roster up, how they've schemed this defense up, and then the guys that they have playing and how they're getting coached and the leverage that they're playing with, it's opportunistic, right? And when you have an opportunistic defense or an explosive defense, you're going to give up explosives, right? And so that's just kind of what happens. Now, everyone wants like the 2000 Ravens that are like, they don't give up anything. And like that's tough to do. But I will take scoring or getting takeaways, which we talked about in the game. I want to say it might have been JSN who caught like a little pass. They're all going after the ball, stripping at it, but no one's tackling them, right? That's a defense that's turnover aware. They want to get the ball out. And so sometimes when you have that mindset, you're going to give up some explosives because a guy's going to go for a punch instead of securing the tackle, or a guy's going to go for the pick like corner 4. Akella Witherspoon went for the pick and gave up the first down, right? Like, so they're trying to take the ball away. That's their mindset. And so that those things are going to happen. I think you'll shore that up as it goes. But to me, when you talk about this young defense, it starts with those front 4, right? 2 second-year guys, 2 first-year guys getting pressure on the quarterback. Then you have Bobby Brown that stops a run. Then you can bring in Michael Hoyt and all these different guys. And the rotation is crazy, right? You have 6 or 7 guys that can rotate in that are on their rookie contracts. And so to me, you have to take advantage of that. That's if we're talking to the biggest, you have to take advantage of those guys making plays now, because eventually someone's going to have to pay them, right? And I don't know if that's when the Rams go from being an offensive team to a defensive team. I just don't know in that situation, but someone's going to have to pay those guys. So while you have them there, allow those guys to make plays and continue to be, explosive on the back end.
Their pressures, their sacks, their takeaways have been featured in the last month, and that's why they've been, seriously, the best defensive team in the league since their bye.
Yeah.
But that can't last. I would come back this week and tell me I'm wrong because of what they did against the Dolphins. That's great. I'm just saying I know Miami is not going to let them tee off against Tua because no one does. He plays the quickest game in the National Football League. You're going to have to tackle in space. You're going to have to stop the run. You're going to have to flex a different muscle defensively against these Dolphins than you did against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding that. It means you have to be more efficient with your rush, right? Meaning if you're Jared Verse, you can't try to bow through him every time. You got to try to win quickly. And then on the back end, you have to sit. And it sucks because you got Tyreek running 22 miles an hour right at you. You have to sit knowing that he's going to break one of those times. He's going to cut in front of you, and you have to understand when that time is throughout the course of the game. And that's what they do. Like, look, the Dolphins, I know those coaches. I grew up under a bunch of them in college. Their whole game plan is we have all this speed to throw short routes. That's literally it. Mm-hmm. Back up so we can just intermediate and short route you to death. That's all they want to do.
I mean, they play 2-back like the Niners. Mm-hmm. They play pre-snap motion more than the Rams. I mean, they've taken the ingredients of this coaching tree and this offense that we know to an nth degree. It's just weird because their scoring has been cut in half since last year.
Well, I think
because their quarterback's been out. I get it.
Yeah, I think they scored 27 against the Bills, and the Bills are no joke.
No joke,
right in Buffalo. And so I think it is a tough test for this young defense. Well, I mean, I just feel like your off-ball linebackers are going to have to play exceptionally well on Monday.
Yeah. All right, more on the Dolphins in just a moment. But with the trade deadline come and gone, let's give it back to Stu and get a wrap on what the Rams essentially didn't do. I know there was one transaction, but are you at all surprised that the Rams were basically standing pat at the deadline?
Not really. I mean, again, the Tre'Davious White trade with the Ravens was expected as far as like him expecting to be moved because that had been something that McVay had talked about and also Les talked about this week. But really, your additions or your acquisitions are going to be the guys who are getting healthy in terms of improving the team and where you want to get better in certain areas. Like that's where you're going to have those additions or acquisitions. Just with the way the roster is set up, and I'm sure with cap constraints and things like that you're currently operating under, you're just waiting for guys to get healthy at this point. And then once they get healthy, that's when you can truly be, this team can truly be the best version of itself. Kind of like what we talked about with, the offensive line getting healthier earlier and how much closer that's going to look to the unit that we saw, throughout training camp and at the beginning of the season. That's kind of similar to how I feel with just staying pat at the trade deadline and not necessarily making any moves or bringing anybody in.
I want to talk about that offensive line and how it might look Monday night in just a second. But because I started this week by saying, am I ever glad the Rams traded that second-round pick to make sure that Braden Fisk is in LA for the next 4 years? Like, that looks like a really good decision right now. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't change it for the world. But knowing you don't have a second coming up in April probably makes you a little reticent to get active at the trade deadline. You don't want to give up necessarily a first and then have to wait until day 3 or day 2 to make a pick, round 3.
Yeah, I would say this. The Rams always they're in the now, right? Where a lot of teams, there were teams selling. I think there were teams obviously buying that are trying to live in the now, like the Commanders. And I think Stu hit it right on the head where you had so many guys out. I mean, you just called the second. What was it? The second game of the season. I think it was Rob Havenstein was the only starter that was out there. Like, so you had so many guys out in that situation. It was kind of like, all right, but they're in the now. And what I mean by the now is they went out and made a move last year to get a guy that they believe can impact this roster today. He's doing that, and I don't think there was a guy that they could have went and got for a third rounder. Right? Maybe you could have went and got Marshawn Lattimore if you wanted to. Like, maybe, right? But are you willing to give up a day 3 pick when you literally have young guys over here, undrafted guys playing exceptionally well? Like, no, like it kind of is what it is. Are you going to give to go get a pass rush? Are you willing to give up, multiple picks? I think the Rams are kind of out of the F them picks era and into more like we're going to build young and develop.
All right, so if their acquisitions at the trade deadline are Joe Noteboom, Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila, how close are those individuals to playing, knowing that Rob Havenstein will not go at right tackle against Miami?
Yeah, so Sean McVay said this week that Jonah's expected to be ready to go, so that's a good sign. And then Steve, they're going to monitor him throughout the week before making a determination, but there is still a possibility that Steve could also play. So Jonah for sure, and then we'll see what happens with Steve, but Maurice, you and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, that presents a really fascinating problem. The blessing you were talking about earlier, as far as what does that picture look like now for the offensive line, depending on who all you have available.
I mean,
how would you line it up? Like, let's say best case scenario, everyone except Rob is up.
Joe is at right tackle. Then I would go back to my starting is Steve Avila at center and Jonah Jackson at left guard. And then we'll go over there. As much as I would love to keep Bo Limmer out there, who's done an awesome job, I think that's your question mark. Like, do you keep him out there and you keep those guys around him? Or do you put the guys in from training camp and you let those guys go to work?
What an awesome problem to have, right? Oh. Like, if your backups on Monday are Joe Noteboom, Bo Limmer, and Justin Dedich, guys who have all had good starting experience now, I think that's a great place to be.
Oh, dude, champagne problems. To have offensive linemen that have had over, hundreds of snaps starting to be sitting on the bench just in case, like, you're comfortable if something were to happen to put a guy in. You may even throw an extra guy out there.
Sure.
Like, hey, let's go 6 linemen in this situation like we've seen the Rams do in the past.
I'm with
to go
you
get some run game.
That one, because you paid them, 2, because they are who you set out to have in the middle. I think the first available big body goes back in. It looks like that's going to be Jonah, right? You said, Stu? Mm-hmm. I think you probably put him right back in at center because that's the decision you made at the end of the summer.
Right.
That's the best configuration. And Bo's played great. I think he's given you good physical elements, but it seems like the piece that they haven't yet touted is just like total situational mastery on your P's and Q's with your pass pro. There have been some breakdowns there, and I'm not sure that's his problem necessarily, but I would give Stafford all the mental breaks you can by putting your best center back in as soon as possible.
I agree with you.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
And then he's a great reliever. I mean, that's not how you designed it to be based on what you signed him for this contract, but I love Joe Noteboom backing up multiple positions, and I'm not sure I would mess with that. You think Warren McClendon was good enough coming off the bench in Seattle to warrant another start potentially?
I mean, I think so, but that's just based on what I've seen as far as just practices, games. Right tackle to me is where he looks most comfortable.
Okay.
He has gotten reps at other positions too, but ultimately I think what you're weighing if you're the Rams coaching staff is do you like the upside with Warren more, and do you feel more comfortable with that based on what you've seen from him recently? Or if you're going for continuity and experience, do you want that which you have in Joe Noteboom out there to give more comfort for Matthew Stafford?
Well, also I believe who you're playing too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is he really good against explosive pass rushers like Chop Robinson? Yep. Is that we saw him play left tackle in Arizona, which was a fish out of water kind of thing, but he got beat 3 ways in that game, right? So you have 2 explosive guys coming off. You got guys. The Dolphins have some guys that can rush. So you just got to kind of see how you do it. Or is he going against Agba, who's more of a physical guy. And if you like that matchup, do you put him there? Like, and I think that's where the Rams have to decide. Do you like No Boom at right tackle? Or are you going to put him at guard? And if you are going to put him at guard, do you like that matchup with this guy? And
how do you want to beat the Dolphins?
How do you want to beat them?
Fits into that game plan
exactly.
best? Or maybe it's just the luxury of, you know what, we can give Steve 6 more days, and maybe that's the most important thing for his health and his 2024 is that we don't have to play him on Monday night if he's not quite ready. I don't know if he is or isn't. I'm just saying those are the built-in luxuries that you've afforded yourself. And I will say this too. Matthew Stafford, I think, has done a masterful job protecting himself, right? It's not like there haven't been free rushers coming at Matthew Stafford. It's not like he hasn't been under duress, but he's been sacked, once since the bye, and that was Max Crosby?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? I mean, he's dirtying it when he needs to. He's playing quick. He's throwing the incompletions he needs to just survive to face another down.
He took a nasty hit in Seattle, but I think
he was just trying to get the roughing.
That's what I said. I think you're talking more like he had some acting classes since he's been in LA, found a way to, sell a little bit. But I like it.
It was great to see a flag in the pocket finally be officially protecting Matthew Stafford, wasn't it? All right. Can we take a lap around the NFC West? Because I think this is a fascinating time to look at the division. With the Cardinals on top at 5-4, the Rams and Niners tied at 4-4, with LA having the head-to-head, and then the Seahawks on their bye bringing up the rear at 4-5. I would make the case that there are the 2 most important games of the season for the Rams' playoff chances being played on Sunday while the Rams are preparing for Monday Night Football. Think I'm crazy? The teams directly behind them in the standings, San Francisco going to Tampa Bay.
Oh.
So the Bucs have lost 3 in a row. They're going into their bye. First of all, let me ask, why did they not go for 2 at Arrowhead?
So I had a coach text me that literally right when that happened. Like, why didn't he go for 2? Coaches, and it's older coaches, go by older rules, right?
I thought the old rule was go for the win if you're on the road.
Not if you're a defensive coach.
Oh.
You believe in your defense, and that's Todd Bowles. He's always been that way.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good for the Rams that they lost that game.
No question.
But that was you're going to give Patrick Mahomes a chance on his home field in overtime? Okay. Anyways, Kyle Shanahan gets Christian McCaffrey back, and they have been a buzzsaw after the bye in recent years. 16-2 since 2022 after their bye. Look out.
Nervous. McCaffrey looks really good. I live in the Bay Area, so that's always what's on the news about what's going on with them. And watching some of their practice clips and him bouncing around, and he wasn't moving like that like a month ago. He was in some pain. So to see him bouncing around, and they still have some issues up there offensively that they have to deal with, but having him back cures a lot of their woes.
But for Baker, it's now or never. I mean, you can't go into your bye losing 4 in a row.
But you can. I really feel like you can. He doesn't have anybody, man.
I think Atlanta's good enough in that division now, and there's so much competition on the NFC bubble. I think this is a must-win for Tampa Bay.
I just don't know how they win with you don't have Mike Evans. You're out there with
or Chris Godwin.
I'm not saying go. The Bucs are going to go do it. I'm just saying, if not, they might be done.
They may be done.
Let me get to the Cardinals next. They traded for a pass rusher, Baron Browning from the Broncos. They've won 3 in a row, and they have one more game before their bye and against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets.
Yeah. So you said this before, like Arizona kind of. I think you said you were worried about them, or they're a year away.
No, I've been saying since the spring that's a problem.
That's what I said. That's what you were saying. Yeah, it was last year. You were saying like they're a year away.
Yeah.
Well, they're here now.
They're here,
and it's because they're willing to go 13 personnel and get muddy with you. It's literally what it is. They're willing to get muddy and then break out into other things and throw the ball. But the fact that they'll go 13 personnel and they'll run James Conner down the middle is like unbelievable. And then they just beat the Bears up. Like they just beat them up physically.
You got to get this one from the Jets. That's what I'm saying. Like you could look back and this could be a tipping point game for the Rams and their playoff chances, whether or not Aaron Rodgers is truly back from the darkness with this roster. Can they turn it around?
Yeah, this is the with every team being within a half game of each other, right? I mean, and especially with the Niners getting healthier and what how competitive the Seahawks made this game this past Sunday, and like we've mentioned with what Arizona's doing, I mean, the margins are getting much, much thinner from a error standpoint, a mistake standpoint, the rest of the season.
As for Seattle, I want to follow up on the point we made last week, which is if you have a chance to throw dirt on a rival, you better do it. And the Rams did. And now Seattle's lost 5 of the last 6. They go into the bye, and then they go at the 49ers, home to Arizona coming out of their bye, at the Jets, at Arizona, home to Green Bay, home to Minnesota. The Seahawks might be done.
That's a rough.
They might be done.
That's a rough run.
In fact, the Rams might be rooting for Seattle as kind of like a spoiler, like beat our competition between now and Week 18 when they come to SoFi.
Well, and is it the Cardinals too that have the bulk of their NFC North slate still to come too?
Yeah, I think everybody's still got some out there, but Arizona is definitely playing a fourth place schedule, which is part of the reason why they're dangerous. And I think this is a high leverage game against the Jets. The easiest path to me to the playoffs is winning the division, being better than those other three, and that's why we spend some time on it here. But I will say the NFC playoff bubble is thinning out. Like, working from the bottom up, tell me if you agree. The 2-7 teams are out, right? Giants, Saints, Panthers, they have any oxygen left?
Saints possibly with the firing of your coach, possibly, but I think they're going to be more of a spoiler.
Yeah.
They'll start knocking teams down for you. As you go on, like they play Atlanta this weekend, that may be a team that gets
like a
them
dead
out.
cat bounce kind of deal.
Yeah.
How about these teams falling out? The 3-5 Cowboys without Dak and the Seahawks team we just mentioned.
Yeah, I would say the Cowboys especially. I mean, they're still trying to figure out if they're going to put Dak on IR because of that hamstring injury he suffered last week. But if that ends up being the case where he's shelved for a minimum of 4 weeks, that obviously makes things very, very challenging for them.
Seattle's funny to me because if they get DK back, all of a sudden, like, they can be dangerous. I felt like not having him really exposed some different things for Geno, not being able to have a guy that can get the ball out too quick. Yeah. But Tyler Lockett's still making plays. Obviously, JSN had a big day. But if you get DK back, now he has a guy that he can get the ball to. You get some of those linemen back for him, you may have a chance.
I guess that was the point I was making, is it's win-win. If they get dangerous, good for them, because they're going to start stacking L's on your division rivals and those teams from the north.
Right.
And you already have the head-to-head against them and a big swing Week 18 at home at SoFi Stadium against the Seahawks. So if we cross out the Cowboys and Seahawks, doesn't matter if you agree or disagree, you're basically looking at 11 teams for 7 spots. And one of those teams right now ahead of the Rams is a Chicago Bears unit that is in a world of hurt. And they better smoke New England at home this week, because look at their remaining schedule. Packers, Vikings, at Detroit, at San Francisco, at Minnesota, Detroit, Seattle, at Green Bay.
Yeah, you stick a fork in them.
Okay.
We can wipe them off this. They have a lot of turmoil, but yeah, it's going down. That Hail Mary is going to affect them for the next month.
That's lingering.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, back to the Dolphins. I cannot get a read on this team. I'm confused. Are they due? Are they done? What are they? What are the Miami Dolphins at 2-6?
I think they're still trying to find their way and get back into a rhythm, especially offensively. I mean, like Maurice mentioned earlier, putting up 27 points against the Bills in Buffalo was the closest I think we've seen this offense look to, what we've been accustomed to it looking like with Tua manning the offense. But it looks so different when he wasn't out there. I mean, they just straight up could not run that offense, no matter which backup they tried, no matter who they signed off the practice squad. It just was not the same. And so, maybe with their performance last week, they'll be closer to, the team that everybody was expecting and that everybody saw earlier in the season. But certainly still having some struggles and I think trying to find their way here.
Yeah, anytime your quarterback's out for 6 weeks or whatever it might have been, that's always going to be tough. The thing is, when he came back, you have to hear how the players talk, right? All the receivers were like, thank God, we're back, right?
Yeah.
Like we can go now. We're good. Put me in fantasy, as Tyreek said. You can play me now. I told you guys to bench me. You can play me now, which is scary because now if they get a passing game going, you still have Mostert, you have HN who can run the ball, and these are they got a track team, right? They're everybody's 4.2 or faster. Waddle is making plays. And our old friend OBJ is still there, right? Odell's there who can show up. So they have weapons. It's just I think it's the same thing as the Rams. The Rams got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back. You saw the offense open up, right? And then you saw the offense kind of sputter a little bit. The question is, do the Dolphins sputter this week, or do they keep getting better as they go?
That's the tough part. What Miami team is going to show up? Because the second week in a row, you're playing a desperate opponent. Desperate. They can't go to 2-7, then it's lights out. But if they win, then they get, I think, the Raiders and the Patriots next. They can go from 2-6 to 5-6 and right there in no time. Mm-hmm. No time.
Yeah. I think that's great for the Rams, though. Because when you play a desperate team, you're going to see everything. Which is what? The playoffs. That's what the playoffs become, right? So you're getting playoff caliber games in the middle of the season.
I think that's why, though, this is the moment where the Rams offense needs to arrive, needs to show up, because you very well may need to score 30 or more points to win this game. Does it have that feel to you?
Oh, yeah. I just feel like I have to say this. Do the Rams feel like they're playing the same defense they played with Aaron Donald, where the corners are always off, backed off, playing soft coverage? This isn't the game to do that. This is the game where you tighten the coverage up a little bit on the outside. You put your hands on those smaller guys as they're running around. You try to reroute them just to slow them up, and you carry with them.
Tua is lethal over the top, though. Downfield, he's accurate.
Oh, he's very accurate, but he lets that ball go early.
Okay.
It's not like he has the Josh Allen bazooka arm where he can throw it late. And no, that thing is going to be up in the air before. So you got a chance to go get it if you have a guy back there that's willing to go get it.
Look, I think their two most recent losses are actually their biggest claim to fame. Right? They've had walk-off field goal losses the last 2 weeks against division leaders in Arizona and Buffalo, playoff teams. If the season were to end right now, I think that's more indicative of who they are, Stu, than whatever existed before.
Well, and that walk-off or the game-winning field goal that the Bills had last week, it was a 61-yarder, but that was set up because of a penalty. So, that, to me, that they were a penalty away from potentially winning that game to me. So, they could just as easily be going into this Monday Night Football matchup 3-5.
So we kind of talked about the confusion in terms of what are they on offense. How about on defense? Because they profile as a bad defensive team. And I know they're getting healthy on that side of the ball, so it could look different this week. But I see strength against strength in terms of the one thing they can do is take away opposing receivers. And that's clearly where the Rams operate. That's where they live.
Well, it's Jalen Ramsey versus Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. They're going to put their best guys on your guys, and you're going to have to hear Jalen talk. He's going to say he knows all your stuff. Like, you're going to have to be able to manipulate him. But when you watch the Arizona Cardinals, when they played him, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a day. He was all over Jalen, right? And so I'm not saying that we have him, that style of receiver on our team, but that just showing you that Jalen, he'll give up some. And so you have to be able to take your shots and your chances at him.
This is where I come back to the tight end position, because when I see what those two teams did, the Cardinals and the Bills, who led them in targets? Trey McBride, 11 targets, 9 catches. Dalton Kincaid, 10 targets, only 4 catches. But what are opposing offensive coordinators doing against this Miami defense? Using that tight end room.
Yeah, I don't think their off-ball linebackers aren't the best. Look, you said it best. Their corners, their safeties, that's where they spent their money, and their pass rushers, right? That's where they spent their money. Their off-ball backers don't cover that well. And then really, if you go back to that Cardinals game, McBride, he beat one of their safeties, I forget the name and the number, but on a corner route that was wide open, like on a 4th down, they got to have it at the end of the game. He ran a nasty corner route, which is by itself, right? And so there's opportunities there for you to do it. I think is that going to be Demarcus Robinson? Or is that going to be another receiver, Tutu Atwell? Or are you going to trust the tight end position to go out there and make that play?
Or is this the night that you put one of those sledgehammer games like we've seen McVay do against the New England Patriots in years past at SoFi Stadium or the Jacksonville Jaguars, where it is a Kyron Williams, Blake Corum night start to finish?
Yeah.
And you slow down the Dolphins offense by keeping them on the sideline.
I will say, especially if Jonah's back and with what he can do in the run game or what you expect him to do in the run game, this would be as good of a game as any to test that out.
All right, let's finish this edition of Between the Horns as we always do with our keys to victory. Who wants it?
I'll go with capping explosive pass plays. I know that's what I mentioned already with one of the things that needed to improve the most over the second half of the season, but we've talked about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and just how lethal that passing game is so much. Really, it starts with, they've got speed all over at the skill positions at running back as well. But really, to me, if you're going to win this game, you need to not get beat over the top by either of those guys and really mitigate the impact their speed can have as far as the damage that it can do against opposing secondaries.
Dominate the line of scrimmage. I think if you're the D-line, you have to force Tua Tagovailoa to be one dimension. You can't allow him to have a running game. Because the play action pass where they get you every time, right? And it's different versions of their play action pass. They'll boot, they'll drop back. If you can stop the running game and force him just to go straight drop back, now you have him where you want him, right? He's in the pocket. He's not going to be as mobile as you want him to be. He's going to have to throw in the tight windows. And then offensively, it's protecting Stafford, right? And being able to run the football. You have to, again, dominate that line of scrimmage. I felt like last week, offensively, you saw some leakage in the protection. There wasn't many holes in the running game. The line of scrimmage was kind of, Seattle did a great job of really manipulating some of the Rams' protections and blocking scheme, getting guys through. Shoring that up and being able to be balanced is going to make the Rams that much more dangerous.
Let me ask, because of the 2 points you just made, how much can a true home field advantage play into that? Because I hope, my dream for Monday night is that this is the best Rams home crowd of the season.
Yeah, I think one, just the snap count is going to be huge, but I also think making plays, right? Against Minnesota, as loud as it seemed for Minnesota, when the Rams were making plays, that thing was jumping in there. Yeah. It was loud, right? And so making plays early, getting that momentum is going to be huge in this game.
I just want Stafford to be able to utilize his cadence,
right,
to comfortably be able to check to runs when he wants to. And then I want Jared Verse to have a full-blown silent count get off, right? Especially coming off a game where you had all those neutral zone infractions. Like, it would be nice to have the offense operate in a library and the defense to operate in the storm.
No question. I think it would be great.
I think my key is going to be handling quick game, right? Because of all the reasons we talked about. Tua's got the quickest time to throw in the league. This is not Brock Purdy. This is not Geno Smith. He's not going to lead the NFL in passing or in drop back game. You're going to have to disrupt him and disrupt their offense in different ways, like you talked about. The other strengths of this defense, which I believe they're there. They're not just a pass rushing front. Like early down defense from Jared Verse, this is the time to focus on that, to see that, to feel him impact that edge in a different way than just puncturing a pocket.
Braden Fish might have won the quickest I've ever seen in the NFL, and I don't know if that's going to be fast enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he won quick in Seattle.
And I don't want to name names, but if that right guard for Seattle wants to play for anyone else on the Rams schedule this year,
please
be your guest.
Yeah, we'll push the trade deadline back a couple more weeks for you.
All right, that was fun. Thank you, MJD. Thank you, Stu. I know you're pulling double day, so we'll let you get back to the gym. What's that? Biceps after lunch?
That's right.
All right, cool. We wrap up this Week 10 edition of Between the Horns, presented by your Southern California Toyota dealers, with an invitation to join us in Inglewood on Monday night under the lights, Rams and Dolphins Week 10. Let's make sure they have that great home field advantage. I'm JB Long, and we'll see you next week on Between the Horns.